The TADA68 in 2020 is honestly a bit of a throwback, but it's still something to consider for people who want to build a custom keyboard for as little money as possible and get some great keycaps out of it too. The TADA has the basic box on a platform design that we've seen over and over again. In particular, the platform is narrower than the box. This creates a floating look, which is something we've seen in the DSi modular keyboard. The sides have pretty much the only piece of design on the case, which are these steps that come out of the finger holes. For each of these holes, there are two LED holes that offer a bit of underglow. They are a straight shot without any diffusion, so the bright spots they cast are unattractive. I keep them off. One side effect to the finger holes is that when looking from the front side, the fact that the bottom is an entire platform is obscured. This gives the impression that the box is held up by small feet instead. The look created here reminds me of those expanding dining tables when they're set to the biggest position. They have tiny central legs and an oversized tabletop. I don't really like it. I think it would have been better if no part of the rear was visible from the front, like in something like the Singa or the RS96. The rear doesn't have much going on except for the mini USB port located between the escape and the 1 key. The cutout is pretty average. On the bottom are 4 rectangular feet, which I prefer to bonbons, a hole to access the reset switch, as well as a large empty area for a sticker. The kit from KBD fans doesn't come with one. The kit comes with keycaps whose quality I'll comment on later. I think they actually pair pretty okay with the black base. From a bit afar, I don't really notice the ugly sides, so a floating beige look isn't so bad. In previous runs on Drop, you had the option to get beige with different colored legends, and I think that offers just the right amount of flair for the default TADA setup. The board is high profile, but when stock, you can actually see the tiniest gap between the top of the case and the bottom of the caps. This can be attributed to the keycaps rather than the case design. I'll get more into that later. Overall, the design is acceptable. It almost seems to me that whoever came up with it initially just had a wedge until their manager told them it was too boring. These weird sides were added then. It doesn't grab your attention, and beige with black might be a weird combination, but I think it's inoffensive. The build quality on the TADA doesn't really deviate from what you'd expect from a cheap pre-built board. The case is injection molded ABS with a textured finish. Under certain lights and angles, you can see some bright and dark spots that you'd expect from a cheap product priced at $10 on KBD fans. The keyboard assembly is tray mounted with 6 screws seemingly distributed at random. Inside there are some amount of ribbing that's not tall enough to touch the bottom of the PCB. It's still about as flexible as expected, but that doesn't really matter once everything is screwed in. I bought this as a DIY kit, so the unclean solder joints are on me, but I assume the pre-built versions are much better. This is a pretty standard PCB. On the left and right sides you can find the tiny SMD LEDs used for the terrible side glow. The PCB supports multiple layouts, which is surprising to me since I've always seen this as a pre-built first and kit second. You can do some of the usual, including ISO as well as a couple different bottom rows. I don't have the supplies needed to confirm, but it seems to support 7 use space bottom row without a Win key. The weirdest alternate layout seems to be making the backspace be the right corner key rather than the tilde. While supporting this, there is no option for split backspace. It's great that the PCB gives you some freedom, but the given options are kinda weird. My biggest complaint about the PCB is the fact that the switches are mounted the wrong way with the LED slots located away from you. Most full travel MX style switches will collide with cherry profile keycaps, creating inconsistent sound and feel, particularly in the home row. This is common in pre-built keyboards, but it's usually a non-issue since most of them ship with OEM profile keycaps, but considering the TADA ships with cherry profile, this seems like a bad oversight. The usual reason for doing this is to provide light to the upper portion of the keycap where there are shine-through legends. Of course, EPBT is not shine-through, so this is doubly pointless. Mine is built with Gatoron Silent inks, whose dampened bottom out sort of masks this issue. I found that some select KL switches with reduced travel will work okay with cherry profile even when in this incorrect position. My favorite is Pro Purple. I bought the DIY kit from KBD fans, and it came with stabilizers and a plate. Even though the PCB supports PCB mount stabilizers, the plate only has cutouts for the plate mount ones, so I used those. I believe the pre-built versions use this same stainless steel plate, which makes up the majority of the completed weight and supports this layout only. The included stabilizers are not the worst ever, but there is some remaining rattle after a generous amount of lube. You'll probably hear some of that in the typing test. Finally, let's take a look at the most impressive part of this kit, which are these keycaps. It's been said that these are made by Enjoy PBT, but I don't really keep up with it, so don't quote me on that. Regardless of the manufacturer, the keycaps are high quality dye-sublimed thick PBT. The legends are very sharp and none of the symbols are goofy like in the cheaper sets. These actually look a lot better than the EPBT black on white I got. That has fuzzy legends while this is razor sharp. The homing F and J keys have both the scoop and the bar, which is something I've seen in EPBT sets. A common problem with PBT keycaps is that longer keys tend to have warp that can impact how it feels when mounted. Thankfully, the spacebar has close to no warp, which is best I've seen in any modern PBT I've owned. I've also heard that Enjoy PVT generally sits slightly higher than normal, and I can confirm that when using QMK, the aforementioned gap between the case and keycap disappears. Last thing to note is that there seems to be some caps with scraggly bottom edges. I've never seen this in any keyset, but it's not a big deal. Overall, the build quality of this board is as expected in all components except the keycaps, which I think are disproportionately high quality. This combined with incorrect switch orientation is a bummer, but you can only get so much for the price. Being a tray mount with a steel plate, there's not much to comment on in the typing experience department. As expected, the bottom mount is firm and has no interesting flex, bounce, or vibrations to speak of. It's been a long time since I've used something like this, but this strikes me as way too loud. These switches are silent and lubed, but there seems to be a good amount of amplification from the bottom case. I found that stuffing it with some paper towels reduced this quite a bit. If you're looking to do a silent build with this, some kind of dampening will be essential. One big draw for the TADA is that it's fully programmable with QMK, but the way you flash it is not like any board I've ever owned. You compile your firmware into a binary file and copy and paste it into the USB storage device that appears when you press the reset button on the bottom of the PCB. Afterwards, you don't just unplug but press escape to load it on. This feels kind of finicky, and I've seen reports of bricked boards because of this. The stock firmware is usable, but for people who want to dip their toes in customizing layouts, this might feel a little risky. For the kit that includes the case, PCB, plate, stabilizers, keycaps, and cable, I paid $89 on KBD Fans. To make it complete, all you need are some switches, which could be under $20. While you will need to solder, that's a pretty good price for a fully programmable 65% board with actually nice keycaps. As a point of comparison, the cheapest 60% board I was able to put together was about $78 for a plateless build with the terrible ketchup and mustard keycaps. The flashing procedure is non-standard, but the fact that it's there places it far ahead of other pre-built keyboards, and this low-cost kit could make a great option for travel. If I was to build this again, I would go plateless using PCB-mounted stabs, and then remove the center standoff in the case. From my experience, plateless tray mount boards without this center post creates a pretty interesting bouncy experience that I don't see elsewhere. A couple years ago, this would have been an easy recommendation, but now there are more players in the market. The up-and-coming Warmier 66 lacks QMK programmability out of the box, but can be configured to receive it, and there are some pricier options that seem like worse value. Of course, there are trade-offs to all of these alternatives, most of which are these very nice keycaps. The only real weak point of the TADA68 is the PCB, and I think it can benefit from an update. KBD Fans has done some of this work for us, making the kit available with their DZ65 RGB PCB. At the time, it's out of stock, but as things start getting back to normal, I predict that this will be a popular offering. An interesting point is, because of its popularity over the years, it has become the de facto standard in mounting points for 65% tray mount PCBs. The classic metal case for the TADA has been around for a while, and KBD Fans also has a low-profile version as well as the compatible Tofu 65. So in that way, the TADA name will die out, but its legacy will live on.